Welcome to the Brass Junkies, a podcast from the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network featuring interviews with the world's greatest brass players by two thoroughly average ones, Lance LaDuke and myself, Andrew Hitz. Today's episode features Marty Hackleman, former horn player for the Canadian Brass, Empire Brass, National Symphony Orchestra, and countless other ensembles. He tells us all about the many stops along his incredible career, how he won an orchestral audition at the age of 19, what he thinks about conductors, and his mental and physical approach to playing the horn. Next. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Brass Junkies. How are you doing today, Lance?
I'm feeling effervescent.
I'm not gonna. I'll look that up later. So before we introduce our,
it does not start with an F.
Okay, thank you, Lance. My grammar is good for a tuba player, which is setting the bar pretty low. So, before we introduce this episode's guest, I would like to ask that if you are enjoying the Brass Junkies, if you could go to iTunes and leave us a rating, and if you have just a moment, if you could leave us a quick review, it would just be really helpful for other people to find our podcast. But if not, we are just happy that you're listening. So, without further ado, this episode's guest is one of the best horn players in the world, and his name is Marty Hackleman. How are you doing, Marty?
I'm doing great, guys. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah, it's well that you should save that judgment until we're done with this. Yeah, I'm just saying, you don't have to decide already.
Okay. Okay.
So Marty has a fascinating bio in terms of what he has done in his career. He has played in countless professional orchestras, including most recently he was the principal horn of the National Symphony Orchestra in Washington D.C., where I live. And that was the other thing that I meant to mention was that I'm on the road still for the summer, and I'm actually in our producer Austin's apartment. And Marty knows Buddy in Austin. Buddy's on the line. We'll make fun of him in just a little bit, so you'll hear him.
Well,
but you what?
Good. I'm glad he's on the line to take some pot shots. That's good.
He definitely is. Yeah, we will not. We won't. Yeah, it's always good if Buddy's on the line, then the guest tends to enjoy it more because Lance and I will, if we're bored, yeah, exactly, we take shots at him rather than the guest. So it's you're doing a great job, Buddy. Would you like to say anything, Buddy?
It's an honor.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you. And I'm in Austin's apartment in Northampton because the internet at my family's summer house is a little suspect, and we wanted to have great sound. So I have to report that Austin's apartment it's kind of like a litter box. There's cat mess everywhere, and there's cat hair, and no, actually, that's not true. He lives with his girlfriend, so she, I'm sure, makes him clean up after himself. So thank you. That's my very backwards way of saying thank you, Austin, for letting me crash your place. So, but getting back to Marty, Marty is the former horn player for Canadian Brass and Empire Brass, and has won countless auditions, and is a soloist and a teacher and all sorts of stuff. I think that pretty much covers it. So, do you have anything else to add, Lance, or are we done?
Raconteur, man about town.
Raconteur, yes.
Raconteur.
Classical guitarist.
So, Marty, can you tell us about the first audition that you won? Because you were quite young, weren't you?
Yeah, I started late. I started, horn when I was 16. I won my first professional job when I was 19. So, I mean, a lot of it was maybe luck, maybe talent, but, you just pretty scared at that point because you realize you just won something and you have no earthly idea what you're going to do because you didn't have any experience. So it was rather nerve-wracking, but it was fairly simple. And that particular job was the Calgary Philharmonic in 1972. And the conductor, Maurice Hanford, was an old horn player under Barbaroli in the Halle Orchestra, and he turned himself into a conductor. So he was a horn player, so he sort of, I guess, could recognize something. But he was friends with an principal cellist and my teacher of the second horn in the Houston Symphony back then. And so they called, and they had this little orchestra. At that time, it was a 30-week orchestra. in Calgary, and then wanted a bunch of vacancies. So they came and auditioned down to Houston, at the University of Houston, and I did the audition, and in the band hall, and there were 11 different people actually that ended up being chosen. They said, "Oh, come back at 2:00," and so there were 11 people lined up outside the band hall, and the conductor and the personnel manager went down the line and says, "I'd like you to play this, I'd like you to play that," and he came to me and said, "We'd like you to play principal horn." And I said, "Okay, great." So it's one of those things I tell my students, and I mean, I worked really hard when I took up the horn and decided to do it. I worked very hard at it. So good things take time, and I was the leader in the band and the orchestra and scholarship and stuff. But if you just are good, that takes time. Great things happen all at once because you're good. And that's sort of what happens in an audition, and that's what happened, 20 minutes later, a couple hours later, your life has changed. So, it was very scary because I knew then I was already working hard, but I realized I didn't have any experience or knowledge. So, I mean, every week, it was Brahms Symphony or Tchaikovsky or something, and I had no clue what they hardly even sounded like, let alone how to play them. So I was really working hard to learn fast. And so I've always, because of that early inception, always worked hard and never found that there wasn't an end game. There was since I didn't have any experience, I didn't know what the walls were. I didn't know what the limits were. There were no rules. I just had to get the job done. And then as I went along quickly, my playing fell apart early on, and I had to rebuild myself a couple times and by myself. And so that's been interesting and successful, evidently. And now, which I think makes me a good teacher because I'm actually my best teacher and my best pupil. So it's led me here now. So it's been a long way. I mean, obviously you look at the things and one can say, wow, you've done so many great things, and other people can say, you just can't hold a job. Maybe there's some validity to both. I've always been excited about whatever I was doing. So I just wanted to do anything the horn could do. So I didn't have any preconceptions of I had to be in this orchestra or I had to do this quintet. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know the quintets when they called me. I had no idea who the Canadian Brass was. But things happen that way. So, and even now, I mean, teaching, I always taught well and enjoyed doing it, and now doing it full time. I didn't have a grand plan to do this, but Kelly and I got to the point where we said, well, we need to change. And, start fishing around and applied for 4 jobs and was offered 3. Got to choose one, and here we are.
You guess. Well, that's, it's the age-old story of the overnight success, which if you peel back that first layer, there's years and years and years and decades of preparation that went into it. What did you always have this sort of tenacity? I mean, even as a kid, before you picked up the horn, was this it just seems like you had this drive. Nothing was going to get in your way.
I don't know if I did. I had certain things I really liked, and I took up, for some reason decided to learn to ride a unicycle, which is kind of hard. Palmistry, that was kind of cool, and weird things. I was average at sports and everything. I liked to write. So I had weird tastes, but I didn't have a drive. It was actually only halfway through high school when a friend of mine, and we were going to a small Catholic school in Houston, and it was a little band, and my best friend said, hey, if you join the band, you can get out of PE. And I said, oh, that's sweet. So I went to the band. It was a 30-piece band. There were no horns in the band. And so I joined the band. He said, what do you want to play? I said, I don't care. So he gave me a baritone. And I ignored that.
Attaboy.
I didn't care. I was out of PE. Now, of course, the genius that I was, I didn't quite figure out that you're out of PE, but you have to spend months walking around the Texas heat in a big wool coat. But it was
that actually wasn't even a marching band. They just made the children do that.
They did. It was, and the whips and chairs to get you out in the field. That was Texas, But so anyway, and then the springtime came around and they did a spring concert. Now there were no French ones in the band, so they did La Fiesta Mexicana, and they brought in a guy from the university to play that little solo. And I really loved that sound, so I went to the band director and I said, well, hey, really like that sound. Can I play that? And he, knowing my expertise in euphonium, yeah, right. He said, we don't have any of those. If you want to go buy one, you can play it. So I talked my father into it, and I took some lessons with the guy, and quickly lost interest, of course. And then got invited, he got us signed up for district, region, and all states. So, of course, we went to district one Saturday morning, woefully unprepared, played about a few notes, and they told me to leave. And it was at that point, basically, for me, where I decided, well, you're not doing anything well. You're halfway through high school, you got nothing really happening. Parents look like they're going to get a divorce. You better choose something. And it didn't really matter to me. I just do something, and that was the last thing I screwed up. I didn't see too many people doing it, and I sort of liked music. My mother was a church organist and a good singer, and we had appreciation of music, and I had taught myself classical guitar. So I had some affinity for music, but the inspiration for the horn, not really. Not until I took it up 120% a day did I fall in love with it and realized I had a bit of modicum of talent for it. So that's the only reason that it happened. It was just because I was tired of screwing things up, and that was something I decided to do, So the tenacity, I don't know, I think it was a desperation more than anything else.
I've heard your story before, and my favorite part of it is the fact that you were halfway through high school and that you had the self-awareness to evaluate the fact that you weren't really good at anything. And I think that there's a whole lot of people that have been halfway through high school that weren't good at anything, that spent zero time thinking about whether they were good at anything, let alone deciding to change it, and then let alone following through on it. That's pretty impressive for a young man of that age.
Yeah, I suppose I never thought of it. And, I just one day I got tired of feeling like a loser, and I realized it was up to me to change it.
And you switched away from the baritone, and that did it overnight, right?
But that pretty much, that was the loser part.
I don't get it.
But no, I just liked the sound of the horn, and it was, it was harder, obviously, but it's, I don't know, it's something that the inspiration of, and then after, as we all know, the more you work on something, the more you love it, the more you get out of it, and it's just a very symbiotic relationship. So I don't know, I didn't ever think about it as anything more than just desperation,
Were you afraid that you might fail?
I didn't care. I basically felt like you've got nothing to lose, so if you go down in flames working 120%, great. If you don't, great. But you can't stay the same.
You're going to learn a thing either way, right?
I was just going to do anything and everything I could and do it and go down in flames. If I was going to go down in flames, then I was not going to have any remorse. So, yeah, no, there was not any particular fear. It was like, I got nothing to lose.
Here's a question. How often, you're in a position now at UMKC where, you're in contact with dozens, if not hundreds of students every year. What percentage of students that you come across, not necessarily there, but in the course of a year, do you see that sort of driver spark or get a hunch that, hey, this kid has that thing that I had?
Yeah, I would have to say at best an overall percentage of any given year, wow, very small. I'd say, well, the thing is actually, the more with my reputation, I'm able to garner and very strong talent comes my way.
Sure.
So that percentage has been going up only because I'm attracting people because of who I am. So there's a natural attrition for the talentless. They don't show up. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, that makes sense.
More as years go by, I've got 2 or 3 at least at all times that are firing on all cylinders and doing whatever it takes. But those are the people who have walked on the shoulders of the mediocrity to get here. You know what I mean? They've crushed a lot of less talentless heads to get here. So, yeah, the percentage is much. It's like many, good teachers. You're seeing the best people that they beat to your door. So.
Sure.
But there's a lot of them out there. They're coming out in different ways. Sometimes I don't think they're as desperate. I don't think decided to do it the same way and time that I did. But they're coming at it like, and I tell them, anybody comes to me, I said, well, I will not inspire you at all. I don't do that. If you're not inspired 100% by yourself, then get out. But I will give you the tools to do it. I promise at that.
Right.
But you have to come with your spirit and soul ready to do it. I'll give you the tools.
That's great.
Does that spook many of them? I mean, do you lose some because you're so frank and direct about that? I hope so, because the ones that you can talk out of it, I hope that they're selling shoes or doing something else.
They are. The vast majority of people, and I don't do it in an antagonistic, mean way, like beating and yelling. I am never.
Sure.
It's always positive, constructive, and finding, No, they all go on, and I tell it to all the people that come in, even the people who want to take lessons that are not performance majors, because they need to feel when they're in there, they're doing 110%. And I'll do it on their terms, but I won't let them slide.
Sure.
So it's a constructive thing. It's a positive and it's a personal thing. It's not a generic sort of like, if you can't play this many high notes, then get out. It's not that at all.
Yeah.
No, I don't. I've never really lost anybody. Most people are like, they kind of cock their heads to the side and say, okay, we got that clear,
So you talk about being inspired on your own. What do you do to stay inspired after all of these years and after all of the success that you've already had?
I try to find different projects and ideas that I can, express things. Like we've got a couple ideas we still want to pursue with recording. I've got a project, for instance, here I'm trying to some solo things, but one thing we're doing here in Kansas City, I came across this idea of working with the composers or two at the school where we're going to do a big thing for my home studio plus the symphony guys and a horn choir feature that features the history of Kansas City, but it's going to be done in sort of a kind of quasi-flash mob style cocktail party, dinner, ball, fundraising thing at Union Station. And it'll be a lot of antiphonal horns throughout the early times before Kansas City was Kansas City, before Union Station, Railway, settlers, the cowboys, the cattle, the World War II, the jazz museums. All these things will have musical features throughout the whole place. So things creative like this that will be filmed, not recorded, that will benefit the city, benefit the conservatory, benefit music in general. Going to try to hopefully link it up with, actually trying to link it up with Ryan Anthony's Cancer Blows. So things like this that are a little more off the wall, and then the stuff we do, in the summer times with Jens and Banff and stuff like that. And as well as just the same time finding for my own playing how to play more efficiently and easier and better. So it's an ongoing thing. There isn't an end game. So I just find myself stimulated. My biggest frustration is I don't have enough time in the day because I still want to have a life and exercise and relax a bit. And so it's usually not finding stimulation. It's finding ways to not get so stimulated sometimes.
Yeah.
Quickly, it looks like Lance has a question, but quickly just to plug, he just mentioned Ryan Anthony and his Cancer Blows charity, and the very first episode of the Brass Junkies was an interview with Ryan Anthony. And if you want to get inspired by a human being's story and by a human being's attitude in the face of of unspeakable hardships, then go check that interview out because it's really incredible. So I just wanted to get that plug in for Ryan because he's
he's amazing, and he's inspirational on so many levels, musically and personally. So so we thought, well, okay, this might be an opportunity to help that too. But,
when is that event scheduled to take place, or is it?
It's going to be a year from now, probably, because it's a question of putting a lot of things in place. But it's going to be probably a 20, 30-minute piece that will feature, individual motifs. It's also going to have a screen, video pictures of representing what the people are going to be listening to, and a detailed program. So you understand it's sort of a tone poem of history, featuring horns, multiple horns, up to probably around 30 horns. and antiphonal. The Union Station is humongous. It's similar to what is in DC, of course, but it's at least as big, or not bigger. So it's going to be a cool thing, you know.
You know, well, you know firsthand that the orchestra industry, or music industry in general, is in a major upheaval right now, and efforts like you're talking about are, to my mind, a logical place to go. Do you feel? I mean, you obviously do, because you're doing an event like this. Do you have a sense of where we are as an industry, where we're going, or what sorts of things we need to do to remain relevant?
I think to a large degree, orchestra things. Let's just talk a little bit about that genre. Has been forced to wake up to being relevant in order to attain and maintain and garner audiences and funds. So they have to open up. They can't just sit there and play, you know, Tchaikovsky symphonies over and over because of the finances. They're not attracting the people or the backing. So I think it's inevitable that they're having to look at it that way. And at the same time, we're putting out so many good quality music students, as you all know. What are they going to do? You know, so they have to become creative and multi-layered, and not just sit by the phone waiting for someone to call. So it's inevitable, really. The logistics of it. The society, you know, I mean, my belief is the value of music immediately plummeted as soon as it was recorded. The first recorded note, that was a death knell of the real power of music, because it ceased to be. It was too accessible. Now, I know there's a difference, and you could say all sorts of yays, but prior to being recorded, if there was one lute player or flute player or a singer, they showed up, everything else was cow noises and wind, all right, before that. And once someone was making music of some type live, it was magic. And as soon as it became more relevant and more prevalent, and now to the epitome of where we have it now, where you can't turn around and without some sort of music going on that you don't, most of the time we don't even hear, or we hear it and we're irritated, but certainly not half the time moved. Mm-hmm. So it's too much of it, you know. And then there's so many other stimulations on top of music, with the videos, etc. And so it's cheapened it down even more. So we have to make it more sparkly and more interesting and more like, here, you know, pick me up kind of thing. Whereas before it was fewer choices, you know. So I think that doing these kind of multi-layered things is inevitable. It's not easy, but if you're going to survive, you have to look at it that way, I think.
So you have an opportunity. You get in a time machine, and you have an opportunity to go talk to your 20-year-old self. How do you advise that student, or yourself, or the 20-year-old who's in your current studio, on how to survive in this climate as a classical, or as a serious musician? I won't even say classical.
Right. I think first of all, take total responsibility for what's going on yourself, and don't wait for either a teacher or an individual, or comparing yourself per se, you know, to something else. Like, well, I'm better than this, therefore I can stop pedaling. You've got to make your own standard. I mean, I tell my students, I said, your main goal is to be slightly better than yesterday, but not as good as tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And if you always are doing that, then you're always going to be moving forward, looking for things, looking for opportunities, looking for growth, trying to be efficient, trying to be fair, trying to learn to work with people. I mean, when I was 20 years old, I had a temper. Sometimes I was not a very nice guy. And it was only because I was so uptight and so worried. You know, and as time went on, I gradually learned to be not an asshole. So just, huh?
I can attest that you're not an asshole anymore.
Yeah, seal of approval over here. But so yeah, I mean, I think that the main thing is that the person has to stay individually motivated and don't have too much of a plan. Just be good. That's the biggest thing with a lot of my people that I teach. They have such specific things that they think make them good, or that if I attain this is the end goal, and that's all I need. No, don't be so limiting. Just be good and do everything you can. Yeah, you have favorites, you have kind of ideals, but I mean, don't rule anything out. I mean, you guys have all know. I mean, you started playing brass music, and you're not in a band someplace, or you've been in orchestras. You know how flexible you have to be, and you didn't know where you end up now.
Sure,
you just took opportunities as they came and made the best of it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so when you hit those, you said your playing fell apart a couple of times. So you hit bumps along the way. What? Two parts. What did you do to get back, and then what prevented you from giving up or taking the guitar up more seriously, or going in another direction altogether?
Yeah, sure. Well, when it first happened, I was in Calgary for 2 years, and then I got Vancouver Symphony, and about 2 or 3 years into that, my playing just gradually fell apart. And now, so I was this talented young kid, and my teachers, they didn't say too much of how anything worked. It's just that, I mean, it's like, especially with the horn players, if you find a decent horn player, a young one in high school or college, you don't barely even look at him, let alone tell him what to do, because you think he's just going to break. And you're lucky to have a decent horn player that doesn't sound like absolute, So don't look at him. So nobody explained to me what I was doing or how I was doing. I was just doing it. And then, of course, if something goes wrong as you're developing and in the orchestra, I mean, at the end of one season, I couldn't play a note. Matter of fact, there was an audition I was doing, and I had to walk off stage at an orchestral audition at the end of that season because I couldn't play another note. So at that juncture, it wasn't in my mind for two reasons: to quit and take up the guitar and do something else. Like, one, this pissed me off, and two, this is what I was doing for a living, and I wasn't gonna give up. This is what I was doing for a living. So, and I didn't want to just fail this way. It'd be one thing if you hit by a car and you couldn't play, okay, make it plan B. But this was like, no, this is ignorance. And so I decided I would figure it out. And I figured I'm going to figure this out. I read all the books and stuff like that, but it was like, yeah, let's just figure this out on your own. So I went to always go back, and I took some lessons. I guess got put together myself and said, okay, how simple can we make the problem, simple to make the solution. And I started looking at the whole thing more ergonomically, like the efficiency of the trombone, for instance. I mean, trombone, it fits the face. And then why is that good? Why is that more natural? Why does it work? The trumpet, the focus of that energy compared. And then the tuba, okay, what are the advantages and disadvantages of that? And then how can you take these understandings and make it much more fit on the horn, which is the most unnatural thing. Too damn tight. It's too small. You got too big a tubes, too long a tube. You got too big a bell. Okay, so you get this glorious sound that occasionally comes out in between cracks. But it was like, I've got to make this easier, just like those other instruments. And so I just started thinking about it more ergonomically, about a complete thing, not just like the embouchure is just the lips. No, it's how three things get along. Two hard things and a soft thing. It's the teeth and the mouthpiece and the lip. It's how those things get along. And they much more fit naturally on something like a trombone than the horn. But there's no reason that you can't look at why the trombone works and what does that size do to mitigate a more efficient embouchure and apply those principles to the horn. So that's the kind of thing I've always done. And I've always felt that I can always get to somebody. My students now call me a wizard. They call me the wizard. So it's like, because I seem to be always I can pick something out that works and fixes things and improves things.
To be clear, they call you the wizard to your face.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they probably call you something else behind your back.
They might, but generally, that's the other thing is, I mean, I make sure everybody gets along and respects each other, and there's no agenda and there's no head trips and stuff. I mean, there's among themselves there are, but not with me.
Right.
There's all sorts of like catty things, but when you walk into my room, when I'm in the room, none of that's going on.
Hearing you talk about reteaching yourself and all that, and just kind of the the intensity that you brought to that process of not only identifying it, but then figuring out what you were going to do and how you were going to go about fixing it reminds me of one of my favorite moments of any masterclass I've attended was a few years ago when you did a masterclass at George Mason, where you used to teach and I still teach, and you were talking about your warm up, which first of all I really liked one of the things you said, which was that you call it your daily routine, and that the byproduct of that is that you end up being warmed up. But then the thing that really stuck out at me was that that you admitted that it's not every single day that you feel equally motivated to be great, and that if you ever didn't weren't really feeling it, you said that you put the horn down and that you go to the kitchen and make a cup of coffee and would then come back, and then that 99% of the time that would do the trick, and that 1% of the time that you still weren't really feeling it, you said it with some spicy language, but you said that you get over yourself and you then just do, you make it happen, and that your main goal was not necessarily to make it better, but to make it more efficient or better than it was yesterday. And I saw a lot of student heads nodding, like along with that, and just the kind of connecting the dots between your level of playing and that kind of intensity on what some people view as a mundane activity. So can you talk to us a little bit about your routine and how you approach it?
I mean, the thing is with the routine, I find it now like actually I've become much, much more efficient over the years. And so prior to that, when I was less efficient, I had to work harder. It's sort of like some people are like natural players, and so they don't need to do much of a routine per se. So those people I sort of liken to like being like a Lamborghini in the garage. You just turn on the key and bang, you're going to 60, you're doing everything you can do. Unbelievable. Well, for most of my career, I was much more like a busted up Chevy with the tire sitting in the corner of the garage. So every morning I had to go out there and put the thing together and rebuild it to get it so I could get, where I was going. So over the years, I've become much more efficient, but still, I find it, even when I've become more efficient, so I had to train myself at every level of playing. Efficiency, relaxation, balance, air, all those things that we talk about, but I tried to do it in a sort of ergonomic way, sometimes just because chops felt so bad, and I had to go play, something impossible. You got to put it together. I couldn't go out on a wing and a prayer. But now it's become much more efficient, where my routine is one that, generally speaking, I take a little bit more time with it, and I can do things more. I don't have to stress it out quite as much because I've become more efficient. But it still maintains the fact that whatever I'm doing, I can do it, know what's the result going to be, because my routine gives me the opportunity to always be playing above whatever else I have to be doing. The last thing I want to do is be in fear of what I have to try to play, and will it come out, and can I hit this or do this? So this keeps me at a high water level, a watermark, so that I can always know basically what's going to come out of the end of the horn, instead of like, well, chops feel good. Is it a good chop day, a bad chop day? That kind of thing. I don't like that feeling. So by doing a routine, it maintains an overall consistency of growth and maintaining the ability to identify problems before they manifest themselves on the stage. We all hate. So that's the reason I do it that way. And it varies with some people just don't need it. But I find, what I always tell people who don't need it, I said, look, well, just try it a little bit. At the very least, you'll be ready if something goes wrong. You'll be able to know how to fix it. I mean, how many natural players have you seen, that something goes wrong and they have no clue how to deal with it. So I always tell natural players, the good news is you're a natural player. I said, the bad news is you're a natural player.
That's right.
So you're going to have to deal with it one way or the other, both ways. So don't trust on just like luck.
I tell all of my students that being on the road, as you know, you don't always have the luxury of having a full warm up, or occasionally any warm up at all. We've all got those stories that have been on the road where there's bad planning, traffic, car accident, whatever. But I tell all of my students that some people do better with a set routine every day, and other people do better with mixing it up each day. But that if you haven't done a set routine every day for a few weeks, then you really have no opinion on which one is better for you.
Right. You got to do something to pay attention to it. I mean, yes, of course, there's mitigating circumstances sometimes, but you really, really want to keep that to the minimum, you know. And it's true. It slides with the person and the type of experience and the time of how things are going in a person's personal career and technically and musically. So, but if it's not in your peripheral vision to have some sort of quasi routine / awareness of the basics on a daily basis, other than just playing a few notes to the lips, get loose, and then you go out and start banging away. That's a little bit like if you're doing that, you've got a bank account and you're living off the money that's just in the account. I feel like if you're doing a routine and have that awareness somewhat, you're more or less living more on the interest of the money, and you're not tapping into the equity of it. You know what I mean? So that there's more safety there, more growth there, more stability. Whereas if you're just pissing away the equity, you're going to wake up one day and there's nothing in the account, you know?
That was deep.
Serious knowledge,
yeah,
man.
It is serious knowledge.
Deep knowledge.
Jeez,
that's a mic drop right there.
Yeah. Mic drop. Pick up your mic, Marty. Oh, man. That was awesome. I've never heard that put that way, but that's, myself and Lance and Buddy, we were all just nodding at one time, and then we started laughing because we were all like, whoa, that's deep. Yeah, we're low brass players here, so.
I know, but, you know, nonetheless.
Smaller words.
Smaller words, yeah.
So,
hey, this is Lance. We'll get you right back to the interview in just a minute. I wanted to, first of all, thank you all for listening. You've been wonderful. We've got hundreds of you that are listening to every episode, and that's just great. It's very rewarding to Andrew and me. And we wanted to let you know that if you're interested in helping us cover the costs associated with recording and uploading and storing these podcasts, there's a quick and easy way for you to do that, and that's through a site called Patreon, Patreon. And at Patreon, if you sign up through that site, you can pick a dollar amount, $1, $3, $5, $10, however much you want. And every time we upload an episode, your account will be deducted for that amount. And you can set an upper limit per month or per year so that if we end up uploading additional content, that you won't be charged more than wherever you set that limit. You also will get access to some free downloads and behind the scenes things that Andrew and I are working on in preparing for future episodes. So if you're interested in helping out, we'd love to have you help you. Thank you very much for listening. Spread the word. Visit pedalnotemedia.com, click on the donate button, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. And now back to your regularly scheduled podcast, already in progress.
Smaller words.
Yeah.
So, hey, I got a hunch that you're not an equipment guy. Is that true?
No, unfortunately, I still have a couple hundred mouthpieces, and I probably sold at least that many.
There you go.
I have a sort of a mute fetish. I think I have like 30 mutes.
Oh my goodness.
I'm not sure what to do with them, but I just am fascinated by it. And then, well, horn-wise, I mean, I played probably pretty much everything that's out there at some point or the other. I mean, I've ended up in the moderate places, and I don't really change too much anymore. But no, I was always fascinated with changes and messing around with equipment to some degree. Not to the point of like, wow, here's the magic bullet, but like, for what I'm trying to do, is this more efficient, you know? It wasn't like, if I play this one, I will be brilliant. It was like, or this piece of equipment was like, I know what I hear in my head and how I want to feel in my body, and if I'm behind the wheel of this car, I can do this race course easier than this car. You know what I mean?
Sense. Yeah. Part of the scientific process.
Yeah, and I think especially as a teacher and a professional, you know, you got to be aware somewhat of what's going on, and you can't just be totally old school, like, well, I'm just my same old whatever. Or at least if you are sticking to it, you'd be able to advise, and I feel as a teacher, be able to advise what's good and what's bad, what is people and others. So you got to keep your eyes open, I think, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of equipment, I was just in Aaron Beck's shop up here in Massachusetts and told him that we were interviewing you, and he said to pass along his regards.
Oh, good. He's a great guy.
Yeah, and does fantastic work too. So
he does. Excellent. Well, when you see him, give him my regards.
Will do.
You know.
All right, here's a. This is more like a Charlie Rose type question. You've had, you're known as being a soloist. You were known as being a chamber musician, an orchestral musician, and now well, not just now, but a college professor. What in those 4 domains? What's your favorite part of each of those gigs, and what's your least favorite part of each of those gigs?
Okay. I think. What do you want to do? You want to start with any one in particular?
You get to choose.
Well, let's start with the orchestra thing. So that's the thing that took up the preponderance of time. I mean, the good news is, as an orchestral musician, you're in a controlled environment that you don't have to make too many decisions about. As principal horn, you had, a certain amount of responsibility, but it was like, okay, you could just do that. And enjoy it. And it was easy in many ways because you didn't have to worry about doing too much else. And you also had automatic face time. That's the one thing about being a teacher that's hard. In an orchestra, you've got 25, 30 hours a week of just banging around on the horn, right? Whatever you're doing, pops, whatever. Teaching, not so much. You're doing some playing with the teacher, so with students and stuff, but it's harder to keep the face up to the old level of just sheer chop time.
Right.
But coming back to the orchestra, you didn't have to think too much. I think the biggest disadvantage with the orchestra was, not so much as principal horn, but with other orchestra, I saw many musicians, they constantly played just to the level of what they were doing. Like I was just saying, it's a pop show, easy show. I don't practice much, I don't play much. Don't have to worry about it. But then Track 5 comes around next week and they're, having problems. And they're like, hey, you got to pay attention, And the other, that was vague, but for a lot of people, but for me it was always because of the routine mentality, that wasn't so much. I think the biggest disadvantage that I didn't like, orchestra playing, easy, kind of lucrative, you could do a good job without too much thought. Bad news is conductors. I think that's the disadvantage, for orchestra stuff. Now, as far as chamber music, I think chamber music is really stimulating, but it takes a huge, as you all know, huge amount of physical responsibility to maintain it and figure out how to make it relevant. I mean, if you're not in a Canadian brass or Empire brass in their heyday, then you're having to pedal really hard to try to find gigs and money and shows, etc. And even if you are in those groups, you've got such a high standard to maintain. Half the time you're scared shitless, to maintain it. So the responsibility musically is sort of intimidating if you let it get in your head, as you know. On the other hand, artistically, it's hugely rewarding. You're a soloist in a sense, but you're being enhanced and enhancing other great people right around you. So there's that beauty. But it comes with a pretty high price tag of physical and mental and traveling stress. Mm-hmm. Soloist, I think, is invigorating again, but to make it relevant, it's sort of irritating. A lot of times, I know I enjoy playing a solo or something, and maybe the audience didn't enjoy it as much. Not because they didn't play it well, it's because of the piece or whatever, or the time. So to do that constantly, again, it takes a lot of, as we all know, physical and mental creativity. But the downside is, how much can you do it? After a while, it's hard to find places to just do that. Mm-hmm. So you kind of combine it, and at the same time, it's hard to always be appreciated. I mean, there's sometimes when you play for some people and they just don't have a clue what you're doing or why you're doing it, So it's a little discouraging sometimes that way. So that's the reason I always try to mix it up that way. And recording, and we all know what the pros of recording is nowadays. You can't even give a CD away half the time anymore. So it's all like a business card now. And as far as teaching goes, I mean, I find it, the advantage and beauty of it is that there's huge satisfaction of making someone better. And as I do that, I felt like I've constantly gotten myself better. Because as we all know, as you take an idea, a thought, or a problem, and you write it down and you talk out loud about it, it becomes clearer. When I have to explain and make my principles relevant to each individual person that comes in each different week on different levels, that's a huge responsibility to make it work. And so, but it generally, I'd say 95% of the time works. And where people walk out like, I know I can do this better. I've got something. there's a good satisfaction in that. I think the only disadvantage sometimes for me is like my own personal development and practicing and playing. Sometimes I'm just tired after doing that. I don't have enough time for myself as much as I used to. But does that help answer the questions, yin and yang, a little bit?
It's spectacular. That's a fantastic answer.
Yeah, that was great.
But there's not too many people that we talk to that have had such success in each of these diverse areas. So I just wanted to kind of capture your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I think it's really the most important thing, and that's why I try to tell my people that ask, don't just do everything. Do anything and everything you can do. And as we said earlier, nowadays, because of the business the way it is, it's hard to just do only one thing. So the people are having to do that. But if you just put it on yourself that you just decide you want to do that before you have to do that, then you'll enjoy it more and you feel more creative and less pressure. It's like, I really wish I could just play in an orchestra, you know. Well, you can't, probably. So just do everything you can right now, and if you end up there, fine. But get used to the idea of keeping your eyes open. You know,
sure.
Anything.
I have a question about your quintet career. You were in the Canadian brass, and then and I remember this was super big news at the time because the Empire Brass and Canadian Brass basically traded horn players as if you were major league baseball teams at the trading deadline with you and Dave Ohanian. And I was just wondering if you could just kind of comment on how that situation came to be, since it's pretty uncommon.
Sure. Yeah, it was sort of strange. My total understanding of it is that, well, it is the truth in my mind. So I joined the Canadians, and they said, look, we want you to join us permanently. We're going to pay out the old horn player for 2 years, and so we'll put you on a salary, and after that we'll make you a full member, equal member. And I said, that's fine. So 2.5 years go by, and said, hey guys, maybe we should have a conversation about this, you know. Oh, right. Yeah, we sort of changed our mind about that. I said, what do you mean, changed your mind? I said, am I doing a good? Oh, no, you're doing a great job. It's fantastic. You know, it's really, really good. But, you know, we're founding members and you're not. And I said, well, that's not my fault, number one. And number two, that's not what you said earlier. And I feel responsible as a new kid on the block as much or more so to up the ante and keep the Canadian brass growing and relevant and better than it was. And I'm doing that. Oh, yeah, you're doing that. So I said, it's not fair. That makes me the only employee. I said, I'm not looking, you know, to get 1/5 of the other projects, but everything that I'm doing and starting, I should, you know, oh, yeah, but that's all based on everything that we've done. I said, well, yeah, and it's maintained by what I'm doing. So we didn't come to agreement. And I said, this is not fair. It's not what you said. It's not what you promised. And so I said, I quit. And they said, oh, nobody quits a Canadian brass. I said, really? So much to the chagrin of my wife at the time, because we had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old and a big house in Toronto and a gold Mercedes, she was a little perplexed at my stomping out. But I had to stick to my guns because it wasn't fair. At any rate, so I'm doing the last few tours with them. One of the things we did, we played in Severance Hall in Cleveland. And now, honestly speaking, I really didn't even know about the Empire Brass, just like I really didn't know about the Canadian Brass. I was just playing my horn, and so I really didn't know that the Empire was like arch enemies and hated the Canadians and all this. I didn't know this. So, but they 4 of them, except for Rolf, were at the concert in Severance Hall, come to find out. And so what I hear later is that they went back to Rolf and said, how's the Canadians? They suck. Oh, well, yeah, but the horn player's pretty good. Oh, this is great. So anyway, during this whole time, that took place, and over these few months period, Chuck Donnenbach was phoning all the horn players that he could think of and say, hey, do you know of any people we should start looking at? Names of people, you know, of soloists and orchestral players, whatever. One of the person he called to get names of people was Dave Ohanian, that I was told. And Dave was saying, yeah, so-and-so's pretty good, so-and-so's pretty good. And basically he sort of said, well, what about me? And so it was kind of hush-hush and quiet, and so they flew out and played, and it was very secret, and they offered him that job, and so, but I was told that basically when he announced it somewhere in the middle of a tour on the tour bus, in the middle of nowhere, told Rolf, by the way, I'm joining Canadian Brass. They pulled the bus over and threw him out of the bus with his suitcase.
Oh my God!
And I wouldn't put that past Rolf at all. So that's how that ended up happening. And then what happened was that Dave left, and they were in a flurry to be like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And so they said, that horn blower, he was pretty good. Why don't you call him up and see what he's doing? And so they did. And so I said, whoa. And so Rolf called me up and, hey, you want to come play a little bit with us? And I said, well, sure, I'll give it a try. So I flew down to Boston and read some stuff. And they said, okay, sounds good. So let's do it. So I did it. That's how that ended up happening.
Wow.
Sort of serendipitous. But again, with no real plan other than just trying to just do whatever I can and not putting up with that, which is I felt unfair. And now, having said that, I sort of see their point of view in the long run, but that was not fair, and they could have worked something out. And Chuck and I get along fine now, and I've seen the guys over the years, and I still work with Ronnie and all that. But after a while, it's like, well, as that stupid saying goes, it is what it is, or was what it was. So let it go. So there's no hard feelings. It was just business. And I've had some other business dealings with Chuck that met with equal success. So, but anyway, that's how that happened. Does that help answer the question a little bit?
That sure does.
Yeah.
I can't believe I never knew that story. I'd never asked you. I'd never asked Sam. Like, it had never come up. I know a whole lot about Empire Brass history and stuff. I just never heard any of that. So there you go.
There you go.
It is what it is, I guess, as one might say.
Yeah, I know.
I was just so enraptured by that story that I did absolutely no thinking about what I was going to ask you next. We were all like, what? Here's something actually, that Buddy will get very mad at me for if I don't ask you. So, Buddy and Austin, are of course, run, Fredericksburg Brass Institute, and, you were just a featured, guest artist, there in June and did some teaching and did a recital. And, first I wanted to know, just to make sure if they treated you okay.
They were great. It was really fantastic, and I really love what they're doing there. Matter of fact, we're talking about trying to bring them out here to the Midwest. The formula and the effectiveness of what they're doing, I think, is very admirable and unique. And they treated me really well. And I know Buddy since so many years. So it's and the music, but music business is so small. The music world is so small. That's one thing I tell my students. I said, no matter how right you think you are. And these guys in your universities or orchestras, little orchestras that you're playing in, you think, I'm going to blow this popsicle stand. I'm out of here. I'm much better than this. And those assholes, blah, blah, blah. You'll see those guys again. They're going to be either on the committee, on the audition committee, or management committee, or so-and-so. I mean, we've all heard it, So try to be nice. And so that's really important. And then Buddy and Austin are doing that in that kind of thing. The environment they bring is positive, constructive to all levels of people working with us. And they're flexible that way. So it's really good, really good.
It's a little awkward because they've had me as a featured guest artist twice, and they refused to hire Lance for whatever reason. So everyone on this call has worked with them except for Lance. But actually, as a result, we're looking for a podcast to be able to trade Buddy to as a producer. So see if maybe But we're.
Am I allowed to say something?
Maybe.
So after the Fred Brass interview, and you brought that up the first time,
yes,
I was like, of course, like after it happened, I thought of like the perfect answer.
Oh, so like, now 2 months later, you've got the perfect comeback. Okay, good.
Yeah, if I may.
Better.
So, as you know, Andrew, when we were starting Fred Brass, it was from below the ground level.
It was below ground.
And we worked really hard, and we were able to get it off the ground due to like the support and generosity of our artists. So the fact that like we already had a relationship with you, with Phil Snedeker, and you guys were really, really helpful in getting it off the ground, and you were very lenient on like, you're inflexible on your time and on your fees.
You do realize that we have one of the best horn players in the world on the line, right? So like, get to the point.
Okay. So, because we had a good relationship with you, we were able to ask you. And at that time, obviously, we knew Lance in his career, but we weren't close to him yet. We were not connected with him in a way that we felt that we could ask him of like that, almost that personal favor. So, but now that we do know Lance much better, there's, I think, a very, very good future between Lance and Fred Brass.
Man, for 2 months, I would have expected a more succct answer than that. I'm just saying.
That's too bad I can't do it. When is it?
Yeah. I'm sure Marty found that story very, very moving.
I mean, that's the kind of stuff that, that's how this business runs. It's like, everybody's rubbing shoulders all the time. And if you're not involved or playing together or working together or trying to work together, and it gets kind of complex. It
is true. So speaking of Canadian brass, as we were 10 minutes ago before Buddy started that story, as you know, I'm sure you've heard, Marty, about our good friend Jens Lindemann and his chop problems and all that he's going through. So we just wanted to give you the opportunity to give him some advice or some words of encouragement.
I think I've been seeing this coming for years, and we talk about it all the time. I mean, it comes back a little bit to the mentality and discipline of responsibility of a routine of sorts. I mean, Jens's idea of a routine is, I think, a tequila shot. So it's that I kept telling him, really, you're gonna, and triple high C's just right off the bat, so you're gonna pay the piper. So I mean, I empathize with him. If he would like a Skype lesson, that would be cool. I'm always there for my buddy Jens. So surprise? No, not a surprise.
We actually have a website that's prayforjens.org, and no, we're not kidding. So if anyone would like the backstory behind our dear friend Jens and his chop problems and our commentary on it, go and check out the interview that Lance and I did of the Brass Junkies just by ourselves, and we kind of go through the whole backstory of Jens and his tequila and triple high C's right out of the gate. So that was very heartfult. Thank you, Marty.
If you want a bumper sticker or a T-shirt that says "Pray for Jens," you can pick those up as well at our website.
That is true.
I'm going to go on the website and definitely get those. And maybe take a picture of it on Facebook. And
we would appreciate that very much. So yeah,
that sounds like a plan.
Very much. So we're getting towards the end here, but do you miss playing in orchestras?
I mean, I don't. Kelly's often asked that too, because it's the greatest music making machine there is. 120 people cranking out the stuff, and yes, it's very exciting. I sort of miss. Frankly, I miss the FaceTime and the ease of playing. And the repertoire is sort of fun because I could concentrate on different things. The milieu, though, I didn't. I did it for so long that I feel like I wasn't really getting that excited. I mean, I enjoyed Mahler 9 and Bruckner, and it's cool, and there was some, but it didn't excite me as much as it had because I've just been doing it. So and for me, it was always a question of like, whatever I was doing, was it exciting me? Was it enticing me? I was doing the orchestra thing very well and efficiently, but I was getting a little bored. So as far as missing it, no. Missing the ease of it, yes. But as far as missing, like, I really wish I was, banging around, not really. So, I mean, I'm especially I've played extra here with the Kansas City and different things, and I'm thinking, wow, this is people who aren't playing first horn. They pay you to do this. This is easy compared to, But I must admit, they asked me to play assistant on something, and I think it was Hellman. No, Firebird or I don't know what it was. The Rite of Spring. That's torture. And after that they said, hey, would you want to play? Extra, I play sporadically, and I very kindly wrote back to, I'd love to play extra with you guys. If you really, really, really need an assistant, I'll be happy to assist, but I hate that. So I just, but aside from the orchestra things, I don't really miss it per se. Like I said, I think I've done it. The ease of it, yes. Musically, I'm getting things explored in different ways with the quintets and the summer work with Jens and All Star and Summit and places and so. Does that answer the question a bit?
Absolutely. And actually, I can't believe I almost forgot to ask you about working with Phil Snedeker and Washington Symphonic Brass, which you've continued to do.
That's just off the charts. I mean, Phil is the best arranger, as we all know, for brass.
He's amazing.
And the stuff we just did, his unbelievable arrangement that'll come out soon of the Alpine Symphony, 23-minute version of that. Really just amazing. He is one of the reasons that I would say I do miss regularly playing with that group. I go back sporadically. I'm going back hopefully in October to play a job with September for the Pope. I think he's doing something. But, that's the kind of playing that I really miss the most. And so in the summers now, I'm able to do some with the guys of Banff. But Phil's work was amazing. And those CDs, I'm so proud of them and so happy that he wrote up to, and he was proud of it. I wrote up to you people. I didn't write to what was in my head. I wrote to challenging you. And he did. So that was really a pleasure to be a part of that and to play first horn on that. That was really amazing.
Great. Lance, anything that we've forgotten?
Man, I doubt it. This has been great. This has been really fascinating. The one, Marty, you've said another thing that we've heard a number of times now. I don't know how many episodes we've done, but this, there's a sort of fearlessness and tenaciousness that runs throughout these interviews, and it's inspiring to hear you talk about it and to hear what you've done and hear how invigorated and charged you are about moving forward and continuing to grow and continuing to develop. So thank you for your time. It's just been really interesting and inspiring to me.
Well,
hopefully the listeners will think so too.
Yeah, I think at these kind of podcasts, it's really fantastic you guys are doing it and bringing so that people as the listeners can appreciate the uniqueness and differences between the personalities, the instruments, and the approaches, but the commonality, like what you're talking about. Like, these people just didn't give up. It wasn't a question of if or maybe I'll give it a try. It was like, no, this is not going to, it's going to go down. So in different ways, different, but it all came down to that determination, and that's what's important.
That's the exact same common thread with all of the interviews I've done for my other podcast, The Entrepreneurial Musician, as well. Yeah, there's just it's all people who all do different things, and all people who don't accept no easily at all. So and are willing to admit mistakes and pivot and go in different directions. But yeah, you just hear that when they're told no, they just turn their efforts somewhere else or keep trying or whatever. But tenaciousness is absolutely the name of the game. So, well, it's been great, Marty. Thank you so much for your time. We could interview you for another couple hours, I think, but we'll spare you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you guys. I hope you got some good information out of this, and I hope the people listening to it enjoyed it as much as I did talking.
Thank you so much, and that will do it for another episode of The Brass Junkies. You've been listening to The Brass Junkies on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to help support the podcast in order to make more episodes like this one possible, please visit pedalnotemedia.com/donate for more details. Also, be sure to check out our latest recording, The Brass Recording Project, at brassrecordingproject.com. The Brass Junkies is produced by Austin Boyer and Buddy Deschler of the Fredericksburg Brass Institute. Executive producers are Andrew Hitz and Lance LaDuke. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.
Oh!